Script marine animals are weird and terrifyingly self-destructive. Crabs rip off their arms when in danger, sea cucumbers explode their guts, and whales crush themselves on land. Yet all this pales in comparison to the nightmare of a marine animal so tormented by stress that it gives in and devours itself. The octopus, when intelligence becomes self-destruction. In the depths of our oceans, few creatures demonstrate the paradox of advanced cognition quite like the octopus. These 8-armed marvels possess cognitive abilities that rival those of vertebrates, yet they engage in behaviors so self-destructive that they challenge our understanding of evolutionary logic. The phenomenon of octopus autophagy, where these intelligent cephalopods literally consume their own arms, stands as one of nature's most perplexing displays of self-inflicted harm. This behavior, observed both in the wild and more frequently in captivity, involves the deliberate consumption of their own appendages, each equipped with millions of neurons and capable of independent movement. What makes this particularly disturbing is that octopuses possess problem-solving abilities comparable to those of young children, yet they systematically destroy their own bodies in what can only be described as a neurological nightmare. In captivity, poor tank conditions such as inadequate space, lack of hiding spots, or improper water chemistry can stress these highly sensitive creatures to the point where they begin consuming their own flesh. Aquarists have documented cases where octopuses in sterile environments begin with minor self-biting that escalates into complete consumption of multiple arms over periods of days or weeks. Their remarkable intelligence becomes a liability when confined to barren artificial environments that fail to provide the complex stimulation these creatures require. The boredom and frustration manifest in increasingly destructive behaviors that mirror self-harm patterns observed in highly intelligent mammals kept in inadequate conditions. Some researchers suggest that neurological dysfunction could cause an octopus to misinterpret its own arms as food sources, given that each arm operates with significant autonomy. The distributed nervous system that makes octopuses such effective hunters may also create vulnerabilities where damaged neural pathways or chemical imbalances lead to catastrophic confusion between self and prey. In laboratory studies, octopuses showing signs of autophagy often display other abnormal behaviors, including repetitive movements, failure to respond to environmental cues, and loss of coordination between arms, suggesting broader neurological disruption. But perhaps even more disturbing is the natural post-mating self-destruction observed in female octopuses. After mating, female octopuses undergo a hormonally driven process of senescence that involves stopping feeding and engaging in self-mutilation, ultimately leading to death before their eggs hatch. The hormonal cascade involves the optic gland, which increases production of sex hormones, insulin-like hormones, and 7-dehydrocholesterol, a cholesterol precursor that becomes toxic in high concentrations. This biochemical program essentially hijacks the female's behavior, compelling her to sacrifice her own life for her offspring. Studies have shown that removing the optic gland stops this self-destruct sequence, allowing females to resume feeding and live longer, though their eggs often die without maternal care. The gruesome process involves tearing off skin, eating their own arms, and slowly wasting away while guarding their eggs. While octopuses demonstrate the horrors of neurological self-destruction, our next creature takes a completely different approach, sacrificing entire organ systems in explosive displays of biological desperation. The sea cucumber, the ultimate act of desperation. In the bizarre theater of marine survival strategies, few performances match the shocking spectacle of sea cucumber evisceration. These unassuming invertebrates possess one of the most extreme defense mechanisms in the animal kingdom, the ability to explosively eject their internal organs when threatened. What makes this behavior particularly remarkable is that sea cucumbers essentially turn themselves inside out, sacrificing vital organs to confuse predators in what amounts to biological warfare at its most extreme. Sea cucumber evisceration occurs when these marine invertebrates forcibly expel portions of their viscera, typically including intestines, respiratory trees, and sometimes gonads, usually through the anus, but occasionally through the mouth. This dramatic response transforms what appears to be a helpless creature into a biological bombshell, creating chaos among would-be predators through the strategic sacrifice of vital organs. The expelled material creates a grotesque distraction that can entangle, poison, or simply disgust potential predators long enough for the sea cucumber to escape to safety. When faced with predation attempts, the sea cucumber's body wall and cloaca contract violently, building internal pressure that ruptures predetermined breakage points in the digestive tract. This isn't random. It represents a carefully evolved system where specific weakened areas allow for controlled organ ejection that minimizes damage to the remaining body structure. The process happens with startling speed, often catching predators completely off guard as their intended meal suddenly explodes into a mass of sticky, writhing internal organs. The expelled organs, serve multiple defensive functions beyond simple shock value. In some species, particularly those in the genus Holothuria, specialized structures called Cuvierian tubules are deployed during evisceration. These white, sticky threads rapidly elongate upon contact with seawater, forming an entangling web that can immobilize attackers for extended periods. The tubules can expand to several times their original length within seconds, creating a net-like trap that makes escape difficult for predators while providing additional time for the sea cucumber to flee. The visceral material itself may be toxic or distasteful, containing concentrated defensive chemicals that create burning sensations in predator mouths or cause temporary paralysis in smaller attackers. The regeneration process that follows represents one of nature's most remarkable recovery systems, demonstrating biological resilience that seems almost miraculous. Stem cells and remaining tissue begin reorganizing almost immediately, with timeline varying from as little as 7 days for basic functionality to return to over 145 days for complete recovery. During this vulnerable period, sea cucumbers must survive with compromised digestive and respiratory systems while slowly rebuilding the complex organ structures they sacrificed for survival. The energy demands of regeneration are enormous, requiring these animals to significantly alter their behavior and metabolism during the recovery period. Environmental stressors beyond predation can also trigger evisceration, revealing the extreme sensitivity of these animals to their surroundings. Poor water quality, temperature fluctuations, rough handling by humans, and other environmental disruptions can cause sea cucumbers to eject their organs even in the absence of immediate predatory threats. If sea cucumbers represent the ultimate in biological sacrifice, our next marine warrior takes self-destruction to an entirely different level, literally punching itself to death with weapons that could shatter bulletproof glass. The mantis shrimp punching glass until death. The mantis shrimp represents one of nature's most formidable living weapons, yet in captivity, this very weapon becomes an instrument of self-destruction. This fascinating marine crustacean possesses specialized raptorial appendages that function like biological sledgehammers, capable of delivering some of the most powerful strikes in the animal kingdom. These remarkable predators have evolved striking mechanisms so sophisticated that they've inspired military and engineering research into new materials and impact-resistant designs. The mantis shrimp's club-like structure can accelerate at speeds up to 23 meters per second, delivering strikes with forces exceeding 1,500 newtons, comparable to the impact of a .22 caliber bullet concentrated into an area smaller than a human thumb. The motion is so rapid it creates cavitation bubbles in water, which collapse to produce additional shock waves, momentary temperatures reaching 4,700 degrees Celsius, and even brief flashes of light through sonoluminescence. This secondary shockwave effect means that mantis shrimp actually hit their targets twice with each strike, once with the physical impact and again with the collapsing cavitation bubble. In the wild, these strikes serve multiple purposes beyond simple prey capture. They crack open hard-shelled prey like crabs and clams with devastating efficiency, but also function as powerful territorial weapons capable of deterring much larger predators. The engineering behind these biological weapons represents millions of years of evolutionary refinement. The clubs feature layered chitin and mineralized hydroxyapatite for impact resistance, creating a structure that can withstand repeated high-force impacts without shattering. The entire striking mechanism operates like a spring-loaded system, storing energy in specialized muscles and tendons before releasing it in an explosive burst that happens faster than human eyes can follow. The biomechanics involved are so complex that materials scientists are still working to fully understand how these structures avoid destroying themselves during such violent impacts. In captivity, however, this formidable weapon becomes a curse that can literally drive these animals to self-destruction. Mantis shrimp kept in aquariums sometimes repeatedly strike glass walls, mistaking their reflection for a rival or expressing frustration from confinement. The psychological stress of captivity appears to trigger compulsive striking behaviors that serve no survival purpose but can continue for hours or days until the animal exhausts itself or inflicts serious self-injury. The force is potent enough to crack or shatter standard aquarium glass, with documented cases where mantis shrimp have broken through quarter-inch thick glass, flooding rooms and escaping their enclosures. These incidents typically occur when animals are kept in undersized tanks that fail to provide adequate space for natural behaviors, leading to increased aggression and repetitive striking patterns against enclosure walls. While their strikes can damage enclosures, the real self-destructive aspect emerges when glass doesn't give way. If tanks use thicker glass or more resilient acrylic materials, repeated pounding can backfire catastrophically on the shrimp itself. Their dactyl clubs, though engineered with remarkable toughness, aren't invincible when subjected to constant abuse against completely unyielding surfaces, structures that never break or give way. Persistent striking against immovable barriers leads to progressive wear, cracking, or severe damage to the appendages, manifesting as craters, chips, or raw areas on club surfaces. The damage often begins as microscopic fractures that gradually expand under repeated stress until the club structure becomes compromised. In severe cases, the striking appendages can become so damaged that they lose their effectiveness entirely, leaving the mantis shrimp unable to hunt or defend itself effectively. Mantis shrimp have evolved a natural response to such injuries through autotomy. They may self-mutilate by tearing off the damaged appendage to promote faster regeneration during their next molt. This process can replace the club entirely within weeks, but in captive environments where stress levels remain high and natural behavioral outlets remain unavailable, the cycle often repeats itself, creating patterns of self-harm that significantly impact long-term health and survival. While mantis shrimp destroy themselves through violent aggression, our next giants of the deep face an entirely different form of self-destruction, one where their own evolutionary perfection becomes their ultimate downfall when they encounter the wrong environment. The whale, giants in distress. The sight of a massive whale helplessly stranded on a beach represents one of nature's most profound tragedies. These magnificent marine mammals become trapped in a deadly paradox when they find themselves on land, where their own massive bodies become instruments of their destruction. The mechanics involve a complex interplay of biological, environmental, and increasingly human-related factors that create perfect storms of confusion and distress. Individual strandings often result from underlying health issues that progressively compromise a whale's ability to navigate effectively or maintain proper buoyancy. Sickness, parasitic infections that affect brain function, injuries from ship strikes that disrupt navigation systems, and the natural effects of aging can all weaken these massive animals until they lose the strength and coordination necessary to fight ocean currents or navigate away from dangerous coastal areas. What makes these strandings particularly tragic is that they often represent the culmination of days or weeks of suffering as sick or injured whales struggle against increasingly overwhelming odds before finally succumbing to forces beyond their control. Marine biologists who perform necropsies on stranded whales frequently discover evidence of prolonged illness, malnutrition, or chronic pain that would have made the animal's final days extremely difficult. Navigation systems that whales depend upon for survival across vast ocean distances can be disrupted by both natural and artificial factors, leading even healthy animals into fatal situations. These marine mammals rely heavily on a sophisticated combination of echolocation, magnetic field detection, and acoustic cues to traverse oceanic expanses, locate feeding grounds, and maintain their position within the water column. However, certain coastal topographies create acoustic dead zones where echolocation signals become unreliable or completely ineffective, leading even experienced whales into progressively shallower waters from which escape becomes impossible as tides recede. Mass strandings present an even more heartbreaking scenario where entire pods of whales beach themselves simultaneously in what appears to be collective tragedy. The highly social nature of many whale species, particularly pilot whales and other toothed whales, creates tragic vulnerability where the distress or disorientation of a single individual can doom an entire group. When a pod leader, matriarch, or other dominant member becomes sick, injured, or disoriented and beaches itself, the strong social bonds that normally ensure group survival can instead become a death trap as healthy animals follow their compromised companion onto the shore. These mass stranding events often unfold over hours or days, with rescue teams desperately working to save as many animals as possible while watching others die despite their best efforts. The emotional toll on both the whales and the humans attempting to help them is enormous, as these intelligent creatures seem to understand their predicament but remain unable to escape it. The physical consequences are swift and devastating for these marine giants whose bodies represent the pinnacle of aquatic adaptation. Whale bodies, evolved to be perfectly supported by water's buoyancy, simply cannot withstand their own massive weight when subjected to the full force of gravity on land. Internal organs become compressed under enormous pressure. Blood circulation becomes restricted and eventually fails, and the respiratory system struggles desperately under the crushing weight of unsupported body mass that can exceed 100 tons in the largest species. Their thick blubber layer, absolutely essential for maintaining body temperature in frigid ocean waters, becomes a deadly liability on land where it traps metabolic heat and accelerates the process of fatal overheating. The massive skin surface, never meant to be exposed to direct sunlight and dry air for extended periods, quickly becomes sunburned ground and begins to dry out and crack, creating painful lesions that compound the animal's distress. Human activities have introduced entirely new contributors to whale strandings that represent fundamental disruptions to the acoustic environment in which these animals evolved. The tragedy of whale strandings pales in comparison to the psychological breakdown we witness in our next marine mammals, creatures whose intelligence becomes their curse when confined by human interference. The dolphin, when social bonds become fatal. The dolphin, humanity's beloved marine mammal ambassador, harbors dark secrets beneath its perpetual smile. These highly intelligent cetaceans engage in self-destructive behaviors that reveal the profound psychological toll of both natural stressors and human interference. This is a dolphin that beached itself. Dolphin strandings occur through a complex interplay of factors. These highly social animals rely on sophisticated echolocation for navigation, but certain coastal features can create acoustic dead zones where signals bounce inaccurately or fail entirely, leading even healthy dolphins into dangerously shallow waters. Environmental factors paint a concerning picture of marine ecosystem disruption. Storms, unusual tidal patterns, and strong currents can disorient dolphins, while health-related causes include infections from morbillivirus, toxin exposure from harmful algal blooms like red tide, and parasitic infestations affecting neurological function. Human activities have introduced entirely new categories of threats. Underwater noise pollution from military sonar, seismic surveys, and shipping traffic interferes with delicate echolocation systems. The social dynamics of dolphin pods create particularly tragic dimensions to mass strandings, as these highly bonded mammals often follow distressed pod members to their death. Captivity-related self-destructive behaviors reveal another layer of psychological complexity. Dolphins in marine parks frequently refuse to eat, reflecting profound stress and depression caused by confinement. Small enclosures prevent natural ranging behaviors, while the absence of varied prey, ocean currents, and dynamic social interactions create sensory deprivation, leading to psychological deterioration. Studies have documented significantly higher stress levels and mortality rates in captive dolphins compared to wild counterparts. The development of stereotypic behaviors such as repetitive swimming patterns, self-harm through tank wall collisions, and social withdrawal indicates severe psychological distress. From the psychological torment of intelligent mammals, we shift to a different kind of violence, the brutal territorial warfare that unfolds when armored crustaceans are trapped together with no possibility of escape. The lobster, fighting to the death in captivity. Lobsters are highly territorial and fundamentally solitary creatures that have evolved sophisticated behavioral strategies for avoiding direct confrontation in their natural ocean habitats. However, when forced into close quarters of crowded holding tanks at supermarkets, restaurants, or during transport, their natural territorial instincts become perverted into relentless violence from which there can be no escape. In their natural environment, American lobsters maintain carefully defended personal territories where they can retreat when threatened and engage in conflicts primarily over territory, food, or mates during breeding season. Crucially, these natural conflicts almost always include options for retreat that allow both parties to survive. However, in crowded commercial holding tanks, this behavioral flexibility becomes impossible. What would normally be brief territorial disputes escalate into prolonged battles where the only outcomes are severe injury, mutilation, or death. The elimination of escape routes triggers stress responses that fundamentally alter lobster behavior, escalating natural territorial instincts into destructive aggression. The fights follow surprisingly structured patterns. These encounters typically begin with threat displays such as raising claws and aggressive posturing. If neither animal retreats, conflict progresses to ritualized aggression where claws are used with restraint and culminates in brief but savage periods of unrestrained combat where lobsters use powerful claws with full force, attempting to tear off appendages or inflict disabling injuries. Environmental factors beyond overcrowding significantly exacerbate this behavior. Low oxygen levels, poor water quality, rough handling during capture, and presence of injured animals all contribute to elevated stress levels that make violence virtually inevitable. While lobsters engage in brutal combat when trapped together, our next crustaceans have evolved a more calculated approach to self-destruction, strategically sacrificing parts of themselves in split-second decisions that can mean the difference between life and death. The crab, sacrificing limbs for freedom. In the intricate world of marine crustaceans, few survival strategies are as simultaneously brutal and brilliant as the deliberate self-amputation practiced by crabs. This remarkable adaptation, known scientifically as autotomy, represents a calculated biological gamble where these armored arthropods trade body parts for freedom, willingly sacrificing claws and legs to escape from predators or adverse situations. Autotomy involves the controlled detachment of appendages at predetermined fracture planes, usually located near the base of legs or claws. This represents a precisely orchestrated biological mechanism where specialized muscles contract to break the limb cleanly at the weakest point, minimizing damage while maximizing survival chances. The physiological mechanics demonstrate remarkable biological engineering. A specialized muscle contracts to fracture the limb cleanly, while hemolymph vessels automatically seal to prevent excessive fluid loss. Crabs possess an open circulatory system where hemolymph flows freely through body cavities, making rapid wound sealing crucial for survival after limb loss. The evolutionary advantages become clear when considering alternatives. A crab that loses a claw to escape a predator's grasp retains the opportunity to survive, regenerate the lost appendage, and eventually reproduce, while one that fails to escape becomes a meal with no future prospect. The regeneration process represents one of the most impressive recovery abilities in the animal kingdom. Lost limbs begin regrowing immediately after the next molting cycle, starting as small buds that gradually develop into fully functional appendages over successive molts. The quality and speed of regeneration depend heavily on the crab's health, nutritional status, age, and environmental conditions. Fiddler crabs provide a particularly striking example. Male fiddler crabs possess one oversized claw used for territorial displays and attracting mates. When lost through autotomy, males can regenerate it over time, though the replacement claw is often lighter, less robust, and initially less effective for social signaling than the original. The strategic self-amputation of crabs represents calculated survival decisions, but our next marine creature takes passive resistance to a tragic extreme, choosing death over adaptation in what may be the ocean's most heartbreaking form of protest. The stingray, refusing life in captivity. The graceful stingray harbors within its streamlined form a profound sensitivity to environmental changes that can manifest in heartbreaking ways. When these elegant cartilaginous fish find themselves removed from their natural habitats and placed in human custody, they often respond with a form of passive resistance that can ultimately prove fatal: the complete refusal to eat. The phenomenon stems from complex physiological, psychological, and environmental factors that highlight these animals' deep connection to their natural habitats. Unlike many marine species that gradually adapt to captive conditions, stingrays often exhibit immediate and persistent rejection of food that can persist for weeks or months, creating a dangerous cycle of malnutrition and weakening.
But what's happening now is this girl has stopped eating. And you see she's lifting her disc a little bit in the front. She's not as active as the rest of them. And when she does go for the food, she's very slow.
The stress response triggered by capture, transport, and confinement represents the primary factor underlying food refusal. The process triggers a physiological stress response that suppresses appetite and normal feeding behaviors. Stingrays are particularly sensitive to changes in their surroundings, and the dramatic shift from natural environments to artificial tanks creates disorientation that can persist long after initial capture trauma. The artificial nature of captive environments creates multiple challenges. Stingrays in the wild forage for food buried in sand using electroreception to locate hidden prey, but captive facilities cannot fully replicate these natural conditions. Water quality parameters that differ from natural conditions significantly impact stingray health and feeding behavior. The dietary challenges extend beyond environmental factors to include fundamental changes in food presentation. In natural habitats, stingrays hunt live prey, including crustaceans, mollusks, and small fish, but captive facilities typically offer prepared foods that lack the movement, texture, and chemical cues that normally trigger feeding responses. The cascading effects of prolonged food refusal in captive stingrays create a downward spiral that becomes increasingly difficult to reverse. Initial weight loss weakens the immune system, making the animals more susceptible to infections and diseases. Muscle wasting affects swimming ability and overall vitality, while malnutrition impairs the function of vital organs, including the liver and digestive system. These physical deteriorations further reduce appetite and feeding motivation, creating a self-perpetuating cycle of decline. Unlike stingrays, whose self-destruction through starvation represents quiet resignation, our next marine gastropods take a more explosive approach to self-sacrifice, literally depleting their life force in spectacular chemical warfare displays. The sea hare, toxic self-defense. Sea hares represent one of marine biology's most fascinating examples of creatures that employ self-sacrificial defense strategies, literally depleting their own biological resources to escape immediate threats. These marine gastropods have evolved an arsenal of chemical defense mechanisms that require them to sacrifice stored energy and metabolic resources in biological trade-offs between immediate survival and long-term fitness. Named for their resemblance to terrestrial rabbits with elongated bodies, wing-like parapodia for swimming, and distinctive rhinophores projecting from their heads like sensory ears, sea hares can achieve impressive sizes up to 75 centimeters in length. Unlike many marine creatures that rely on physical speed or armor, sea hares have evolved as specialists in chemical defense. The most dramatic defensive behavior is the inking response, where threatened sea hares eject massive clouds of brightly colored ink from specialized glands. This ink, derived from pigments concentrated from their algae diet, can range from deep purple and red to stark white, creating underwater displays that serve multiple defensive functions simultaneously. The defensive ink operates through several sophisticated mechanisms. The visual component creates an immediate smokescreen effect while simultaneously startling predators. More significantly, the ink contains complex chemical compounds that directly interfere with predator sensory systems, temporarily disrupting their ability to smell, taste, or detect prey through chemoreception. Studies have demonstrated that sea hare ink can engage in phagomimicry, essentially mimicking food particles to distract predators and redirect their attention away from the escaping sea hare. However, the production and deployment of this defensive ink represents a significant metabolic investment that can leave sea hares temporarily vulnerable and energetically depleted. The metabolic cost of maintaining these multiple chemical defense systems represents a fascinating example of evolutionary trade-offs in action. Sea hares must constantly balance the energy invested in chemical weapons production against the energy available for other essential life processes, including growth, reproduction, immune function, and basic metabolism. Animals that overinvest in defensive chemistry may find themselves unable to grow quickly, reproduce effectively, or maintain optimal health, while those that underinvest may fall victim to predators despite being otherwise healthy and well adapted to their environment. From these chemical warriors who sacrifice their metabolic resources for survival, we encounter our final and perhaps most disturbing example: apex predators, so driven by territorial instincts that they literally tear each other apart in cannibalistic frenzies that can destroy entire populations. The crocodile, cannibalistic self-destruction. Crocodiles, the ultimate apex predators and living remnants of the age of dinosaurs, possess a dark secret that challenges our understanding of these seemingly invincible armored behemoths. Despite their reputation as perfectly engineered killing machines, crocodiles engage in savage cannibalistic behaviors that can result in severe injury, permanent disability, or death among members of their own species. Male crocodiles, particularly during breeding seasons, become fiercely territorial, defending valuable habitat including rivers, lakes, and swamps through increasingly escalating displays of aggression. Species like the Nile crocodile and American alligator engage in territorial disputes that begin with ritualized threat displays, head slapping against water, explosive jaw snapping, powerful tail thrashing, and deep bellowing vocalizations. However, when these warning displays fail to deter competitors, or when resources become sufficiently scarce, crocodile territorial disputes can escalate into savage physical confrontations involving biting, thrashing, rolling, and tail whipping that continue until one animal is killed, permanently disabled, or so severely injured that it can no longer pose a competitive threat. The cannibalistic tendencies represent perhaps the most disturbing aspect of their self-destructive behaviors. Larger crocodiles regularly prey upon smaller members of their own species, particularly juveniles who lack the size and experience to defend themselves effectively. In Australia, saltwater crocodiles have been extensively documented engaging in cannibalistic behavior, consuming younger conspecifics during food scarcity or in crowded habitats where territorial competition intensifies beyond sustainable levels. During mating season, the intensity of male-male competition reaches frenzied violence levels, with dominant males engaging in aggressive displays and physical confrontations designed to secure exclusive access to females and eliminate reproductive competition. These encounters can escalate into life-or-death battles where survival depends not only on size and strength, but also on willingness to inflict and absorb tremendous physical punishment. Environmental pressures significantly exacerbate aggressive tendencies. Crowded habitats where multiple large predators compete for limited space inevitably result in increased frequency and intensity of violent encounters. And that's a wrap. Don't forget to check out the other videos on your screen. We'll be keeping you posted on any new developments in this ongoing saga.